Hi, all. Welcome to another episode of Saturday Architecture, and this is the second one this year. And we also have Narosh. So, continuing from an intention as an architect, as a leader in engineering, we'll check with Nirosh on what his intention for the year is, and also he's got a big job to do as head of engineering of a pretty large team. So we'll hear a little bit more about what are the things that he would like to focus on this year, and most importantly, I guess a lot of architects come up with ideas and concepts, and how do you actually land it? And I think that's the key aspect. So we'll focus on these things in today's discussion. uh, Welcome, Deepak. Deepak is a consultant with Microsoft with services. He also runs a podcast called Enterprise Tech Unplugged. You can check out his podcast while you are driving. You don't have to see it as you have to see this video, so that's a lot more easier. And Nirosh is, as I said, a head with engineering for a large IT services company based out of Colombo. Welcome, guys. So let's dive lightly into it. And Nirosh, what's your intention for 2020 as an individual, as a head of engineering services?
Uh, from objective point of view, I have one short-term goal and a long-term goal. The short-term goal is just like we talk in lean concept. One of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go through each of the software development phases and across the organization as well, and then see where the things get stuck and where the WIP work in progress build up, and then attack those things and then release them. That's my primary objective. That's like within the next 20, 30 days, I'm going to do that. And then in addition to attacking bottlenecks, what I'm going to do next is to see ways and means to amplify the feedback cycle. Let me give you an example of that. In regular way of software development, you spend at least 30 to 40% of your time developing the software code, and then you give it to a QA guy, and he also spend about 20% of the entire effort looking at features, identifying bugs, and then reporting them back to the developers. But if you can amplify that feedback and then maybe create some kind of a cohesive unit in between software engineers and QA guys, especially piggyback on concepts like software development, engineering, testing, then you will have a significant improvement in identifying bugs as early as you can. And then when it comes to design related issues, they need to have certain ways of identifying design related issues early so that they won't penetrate into development. And then you will do a wrong design, and then by the time QA start looking at the actual non-functional aspect of the requirement, only you figure out that there is a design issue. And then probably we may land on the UAT to figure out that what customer wants is not being delivered. I mean, we have done certain improvement with Agile by making the chunk smaller, but still you see that there are a certain amount of requirement related issues penetrate through all those gates we have and landed on UAT. So amplify feedback cycle is the second one, and then improve the culture to such a level so that we embrace failures. So that's the third thing. So those are my short-term goals. And in long term, I have like a 5-dimensional attack where I have identified self, customer, vision, competition, and industry. in those 5 dimensions, I have like break them into multiple pieces. We can discuss those things in later. But one good example that I can tell you right now is with respect to maybe customer aspect, how the engineering workforce can help expand our presence or the competence level, and then help business grow toward customers by upselling, cross-selling, and growing the account. One of the primary initiative that I'm thinking of doing after this initial 30, 40 days is to see whether there are ways of giving certain complementary products with the primary products, and then see whether we can create new business opportunities. As an example, if you can give a monitoring dashboard free of charge with the solution, and then maybe look for ways to sign a support contract with them, since you have already have the framework to support. So that's something that I'm going to look at. So likewise, I have like OKR framework related objectives and activities being defined across all these 5 dimensions. So that's my long-term plan.
That's very nice. One thing which in Tiny Magic we've been doing for the past 5 to 6 months is asking the team to come up with something called micro products.
Yes,
So we've been used to the concept of products, okay, but the challenge with products is it requires a lot of domain knowledge, it requires money, time, all that is needed. But what you just said, I'm just giving a word to it. It is a micro product. So in your case, the dashboard is a micro product. It has a
correct.
very focused, narrow use case, maybe one or two use cases, but that's what it does. And you make that use case very uh, better over a period of time. So the advantage of a micro product is that you need not have too much of a domain knowledge. As long as you're clear on that one use case, you're fine. And you keep focusing on that more and more over a period of time, it becomes a very powerful entity. For example, if you take WhatsApp is actually a micro product when it started off. What does it actually do? When if you remember the time it launched, it is nothing but an SMS text. That's it. It didn't do anything else. It could give you SMS over the internet. You need not spend a lot of money. So it had just one use case: share text messages. Then came groups, video, multimedia, all that happened years later. But it started off with just text. So, and the kind of interesting thing about a micro product focus is, uh, at that time SMS was there,
Yeah,
right? But then a micro product which just addresses one part of that use case. The use case was over internet. How do I share text messages without spending a lot of money? Here they could do that. So, like that, probably taking your idea a little forward, you can have teams come up with micro products for which no additional budgets will be allocated, but they have to come up with some micro product in their area of work that might help you give that uh, focus or
cultural
something
aspect.
tangible. Yeah. So
Yes,
rather than, like, for example, it's kind of difficult to ask, are you being innovative? Are you thinking beyond what is there in the specification? So instead of that, you can say, what is your micro product? What is the next version? What is going to happen? It might give you more something to hold on to.
yes. In the same line of thought, if you look at the way businesses operate as well, right now you have microservice concept like widely spreading across probably the entire IT industry. And if you look at why it is happening that way, is the primary promise the microservice made is it gives you a way to, in isolation, define your business values and then help you to go improve them without impacting any of those other value streams, which is again then probably the next level of what you just said. So, yes, world is also moving toward micro concepts in every angle.
That's true. So you said you had now this is at a personal level, right? And then as a team level, you had those five interesting pillars that you wanted to work on. Of course, you address the customer bit. Can you talk a little bit more about the other pillars, like for self? What? How are you
Yes,
thinking?
of course. Yes, self pillar is basically broken into two main pillars and then one sub pillar. Self and value delivery or value acquiring stream, which is the project we do. So that's what the main income for the organization. That's the primary thing, and that's the biggest one as well. Our main focus is on and around that. So when it comes to software development stream, you're talking about pre-sale to the software development life cycle, and then toward the maintenance of those software. So how you going to identify places where things can be improved? That's the primary focus. And then around that, you have all this internal software that help you achieve your main goal. And also there are other things like maybe firefighting, which prevent you from achieving your goals. Those are like kind of anti-work. So how you going to reduce that aspect? And then also you have people aspect, which is the primary supply chain that probably help you do your things better. So when it comes to people aspect, improving of hiring, onboarding, training and cross-skilling, upskilling people, and then mentoring and grooming them, retaining them, and also develop a culture so that they're going to stay with you forever. So those are the areas where you're going to spend most time addressing when it comes to self. When it comes to customers, if I just explain a bit more there as well, it's all about cross-selling, upselling, and growing account using your engineering competencies. So how you going to expand toward customer using your architects, so that architects going to have certain amount of objectives to grow their account by mean of introducing supplementary products or replacing them with better products, things like that.
I have a question for Nirosh. I'm sorry I have had a bad internet connection today, and the great firewall interfered sometime. So, uh, uh, so you initially you mentioned something about the efficiencies between the developers and the QA. You want to bring them closer and improve your feedback, amplify the feedback loops. My question is, have you looked at so you also mentioned software development
Development is very interesting.
and testing. So are you talking about merging those roles, or how do you sort of expect them to interact between the the developers and the testers and the QA? What is the relationship which you're expecting in your engineering organization?
Okay. In any traditional organization, you're going to have KPIs assigned to developers as well as quality assurance engineers. So one of the primary objective that you assign to quality assurance engineer is to identify bugs. How many bugs you identify in this particular piece of software? So
Right.
if you drive them toward identifying bugs, then the primary motive is to identify bugs,
Right.
which means they're happy if you find more bugs,
Right.
which in my opinion has to be the opposite of that. So that they have to be happy if you don't find bugs.
Mm-hmm.
So that their objective is also to reduce bugs, not to increase bugs. So if the
Mm-hmm.
bug is found, then it's their problem as well as developers' problem. So that's how I'm going to organize that structure. But there is a debate right now going on. So what we initially thought is that we will have certain amount of engineering training
Mm-hmm.
given to QA engineers as well. So that
Mm-hmm.
maybe the 1 year, for a 1 year period, they will work with the engineer so that they know exactly how the engineer works. Thereby,
Mm-hmm.
they will help with that understanding, and then with the clear-cut QA competency, they will
Mm-hmm.
tell the engineer, okay, if you do it this way, then I have seen this fail 100 times before in
Mm-hmm.
XYZ software as well as PQRS software, so that you need to probably work on developing this in a slightly different way. So, as an example, it could be, say, a login module, and then
Mm-hmm.
if he has previously experienced that the best way to handle login related security issue is to follow maybe OAuth protocol, then he can propose that
Mm-hmm.
based on his previous experience. Just like
Mm-hmm.
a developer, uh, based on his competency, he decides that, okay, OAuth 2 is the way of attacking most of the security related issues related to login and authentication and authorization. The engineer, QA engineer also think and have that engineer's heart to help him improve his software before it get to the QA
So, so,
stage.
I, I'm going to sort of throw a radical question, which is not really radical anymore because a lot of product companies have gone that way of totally eliminating QA from the pipeline itself. It says you build it, you test it, you run it. It is all one team. So there is no sort of handover between teams. So you build it, you test it yourself, and you are accountable for what happens in production. So if something goes bad in production, the developer is going to get the call. There's nobody else in between the developer and the actual user. Is that something which has crossed your mind, or something which you aspire to do someday, or do you think that is irrelevant in your scenario?
I actually need to do a little bit of research about the human psychology in that aspect. You're
Mm-hmm.
talking about doing something and then identify the issue yourself. So
Yes.
that if you put 100%, and if from psychological point of view, if you feel like I have given 100% for this software, then there is a psychological barrier
Mm-hmm.
that prevent you from, because you have addressed almost all the things that you can imagine, so that the third guy
No,
need to
no,
come
no.
in.
My question. So let me just sort of rephrase it in the sense that, so this is from the perspective of amplifying the feedback loop. So
Right.
by doing this, you are eliminating the levels of feedback which you get from your actual end user. So the developer actually gets real, means if the user is unhappy, the user is sort of in your face. So the developer is in face to face with the user. So there is, I think there is nothing better. You don't need any more amplification than that. When user can actually come face to face to you, and there's no sort of a wall between, a QA wall in between user and the actual developer. Do you think that is something which you can consider, or do you think that is more utopian ideal?
I will definitely consider that, but with a slight change, which is what
Mm-hmm.
I'm doing right now.
Mm-hmm.
So if you want the guy who develop to be certify the software as well, then I think it's this. There is a psychological thing that will reduce the effectiveness of that effort, but rather another guy with engineering background or developer's heart who's capable of doing the same thing, if he is assigned to certify that, I think that combination would work, so that those two as a unit is responsible for delivering a quality product to the customer. So if you just let the guy who write the code to test it, then if he
No,
let just
so
give
then what they
150%.
believe, that the concept they believe is testing in production, which is the DevOps. I say there is no better certification than the user actually using the software and saying, yeah, this is okay. Because you don't
and and, and it's kind of probably I would I guess it's also got to do with we see the benefits of that in Microsoft. Narosh. I think one of the things which I think it started a year before Satya took up is that they started removing this role of SDEE test, software
Yes.
development engineer test. Okay, so it's kind of removed the testing role itself. And even in my company, right, there was cases like till around 2 years back. I didn't even realize this. The developers will move something into staging and then say, Kumaran, can you just check it before I move to production? 2 years back, I took a call. I says, no, I'm not going to test things in staging. You got the requirement. You understood it. You move it to production. If something bad happens, we will face the music together. But you will learn from it and make sure that from the next time you don't do those silly things into production. So it's kind of interesting. Like, let's call it an extreme objective, Narush. Okay, just a suggestion that can I have a development team where there is nothing like a QA role? Because when you write software, it is expected it to have good quality. So why do you need another person to ensure quality? The code that you write, the intention itself should be of high quality. So probably maybe with a high confidence customer with a low risk feature or a team which is not directly doing critical releases, right? Uh, Start experimenting with them to see, can I, is it possible for me to eliminate the QA role itself? Testing has to be done, no doubt on that, but not a separate person doing that part.
Somebody in the
When you
team
say
can play the role.
yes, that I think that's where it is heading.
Mm.
When you say testing in production, especially when it comes to customers like large banks, where sensitive, a lot of sensitive stuff being improved. Testing something in production has to be a careful decision to make, especially we may ended up making headlines by doing that
I
on a
had,
bad day.
I think I didn't tell it properly. I didn't mean testing in production.
No,
I
I
meant,
meant testing in production. Literally, what
oh,
he just
okay,
said.
okay. So what I meant is the responsibility of quality should be on the shoulders of the developer. It cannot be somebody else's responsibility, even by mistake.
So in that case, the maybe we need to based on my understanding of the concept, I primarily agree with that what you just said, and this is exactly the direction which I'm also heading. But when it comes to a developer test, software being tested by a developer, what in my opinion, right now, probably it is the interim phase. Heading is that I'm trying to get an engineer to reduce that 20% effort we put on testing. That's the whole idea. So altogether, if you break the software development phase, which is the value delivery stream, if you break it into phases, designing or requirement gathering is about roughly 10%, and design is about another 10-12%. And then you do the development, which is about 30 to 40%. And then you have another piece which take about another 20% of your time. So if you take development and testing, that alone is about 60% of your entire effort. So if you just pace it, then you anyway will have a lot of duplicate work, and then just because that you identify certain things later, you will spend time doing unnecessary stuff. So if you can amplify the feedback cycle, you can reduce the amount of time you need to complete this development and testing work, which is right now about 60% of the entire thing. So this particular how effectively we can do that, combining those two teams together and then have common objective would do that, and
Hmm.
that as the interim solution. And then next solution would be that you directly hire the engineers and then let them group together and come up with ways to improve the ultimate quality of the software. So as an interim solution, what I think is that since you have the QA arm already in place, let them focus on QA aspect, but then they need to have certain engineering mindset, and then they need to write a lot of scripts, tools to find better ways, more efficient ways of identifying bugs, and also reduce repetitive testing cycles.
I know it's like changing things when the flight is in motion, right? As the engine is running, you have to make changes to the engine. So one of the things could be is from a testing perspective, right? They find an issue, they fix it. So the engineering team is not just restricted to raising a bug. You find an issue, you fix it. Now, on the other hand, the dev team will actually take the test cases and start testing. So you can start blurring that boundary between them. So that's another approach that you could take. So
Definitely, that I really like what you just said, Kumaran. You earlier, when you have like separate KPIs assigned to QA, there was a reluctance or resistance of sharing the test case with the developers as well early. So it can't be the case, because they are letting the developers do mistakes, because that way they can achieve their KPIs. So it can't be the KPI driven thing.
Yeah. I think the KPI should be common. KPI should be production. Production, what happens in production should be a shared KPI. It should not be
Absolutely. I really like what you said.
right. Right. So it has to be same. It says QA is so if you are actually merging the teams, basically merging can happen at hierarchical level or even at the KPI level. Say both. So you can start with KPI that you are going to be measured by what happens in production. We don't really care about how many bugs you find or don't find. If the software does not succeed in production, you are equally accountable for either you are QA or dev. If it doesn't work in production, both are equally accountable. You are evaluated at that, and that is the final KPI. Rest is all temporary KPI. You can say interim level of KPI.
see, and I think once you kind of start telling the QA team has to fix bugs, then they would say, I don't tolerate bugs. Take the test case, test it, and then give it to me. They will start pushing that pressure onto the dev team. And the dev team will actually start telling, oh, okay, give me the test case itself, I will test it before giving it to you. So,
Yes, I mean, since there are like people who have grown to be a QA for quite some time, and then there are like very senior people in organizations who went through that production. I know that particular mindset. So they have grown with that mindset where QA is a separate entity, so that there are a lot of frictions among senior leadership as well when you implement this kind of concept. So that
I think one
what
one thing that could probably help is the Spotify squad model, right? Which those customers have used. So one of the things probably is rather than doing it all across your team, you can pick up the green projects or the green team within them, and then set it up as a quad model where it's pretty much flat hierarchy. There are responsibilities of the team, but not responsibilities of an individual. That's another way you could try bringing about this culture change. Pick
You
one
can
group,
pilot.
pilot.
Yeah, you
Yeah,
can pilot it.
yeah, so that's
The
exactly
low risk
is on the
group, you can pilot it with low risk group because we
yes.
understand with banks and financial institutions this is always a concern that you don't want to make high risk changes immediately, and this is probably maybe the highest risk change you can make to an engineering organization. And you can learn from what other people have done, and there are a lot of examples including Microsoft and Google and so many other organizations. So and a lot of this information is actually public, so you don't really have to have inside information to to learn from all these things.
Deepak, you're breaking up. You just said that you can learn from Microsoft, and then you broke up. I don't know whether it is just me.
Yeah, probably because I'm on a my network probably keeps dropping in between. But what I said was you can learn from a lot of organizations, including Microsoft, Google, Amazon. All these have implemented what parts of or all of what we have just discussed, and they have made this public in a lot of white papers, a lot of YouTube videos. You can go and see how they have done it, and you can really learn from it.
Yeah, yeah, I have done a lot of research into how Google has implemented this. So very
Yeah.
interesting use cases. Yes.
And considering that people are running from projects from one end, one project to another project, right? That last pillar about thought leadership in industry, the biggest challenge anybody will say is, hey, we don't have time. They don't have time to learn. They don't have time to think. They're just doing, doing, doing. So, how do you plan to handle that challenge?
Yes, this is one of those like a primary challenge we had suffered for some time now. So that I have a couple of strong cases to present as the disadvantage of not doing that kind of work for last maybe 1 year or so. So because of that, what I'm proposing is some kind of a structural change to them, and also certain percentage of time allocation for R&D activities. So any organization strive for 80% utilization, so that you have another 20% left there. So out of which I say you will have maybe another 10% right now utilized for your firefighting activities, and you have another 10%. Give it to me for R&D as well as to reduce that firefighting activity, which was a promising request. So because of that, I managed to handle it that way.
Okay, so that's good that you've got that support. And one possible tip, right, like in Tiny Magic itself, is kind of say that rather than 10%, just tell 10 minutes and following a tiny habit. It would be something like as soon as you come into the office, the 10 minutes is towards non technical stuff or non firefighting work. And that you spend 10 minutes learning, and every Friday you spend half an hour giving a TED talk on what you learned to your team. And every month, the best TED talks will actually come up as a group TED talk. That way, you could give a structure to this thinking and learning. And these TED talks, which is there, you can start recording it for your internal videos, and the ones which are good can go public. So you could kind
Absolutely.
of tie it up that way. So the general thing is take 10% of people are on their own track doing something in their own world, right? So here it would be like, let's say there's a team of 10 people and each one spends 10 minutes. That Friday, there'll be a 15-minute, thank God it's Friday session. You can come up with your own time, name terminology for that, where one or two members will present what they learned over the week in that 15 minutes. So if you have, let's say, 30 groups, now we have 30 into 2, 60 TED Talks happening in a week. Now, 4 weeks like that, even if let's say there's just one person giving the TED Talk, let's keep it simple, it's 30 TED Talks. Now you've done it for 3 weeks. That means you have had at least 90 TED Talks. Out of that, you can pick the best one or best three and have that as a half an hour TED Talk for the entire group, for everybody in the company. So it gives a kind of, you start within small, that within a company itself, people start feeling good as thought leaders. And once you start this rolling over 3-4 months, now you can take it public.
Correct. Yes. That's an incremental improvement that we can definitely try on.
Sure. Okay. Great. I think that was a great discussion. Thanks for joining, Nirosh and Deepak. We will keep uh, talking and thinking about this, and hopefully we'll end up 2020 with a much better results and then see how we stand at the end, Narosh, with you and your team. Thank you all for
Okay.
joining.
Thank you.
Thank you.